This is groundbreaking. Microorganisms in your gut can elevate your athletic performance. I'm not joking. Isn't that super cool? Certain microorganisms in your gut can help you run faster and for longer. Welcome to the world of performance-enhancing microorganisms. You may be familiar with the idea that your gut microbiome is linked to your overall health and well-being. It can help explain things like inflammatory bowel disease, allergies, and autoimmune disorders. But how exactly these microorganisms lead us down certain disease pathways is still poorly understood. That's why a lot of research is currently happening. There's still so much about our own human microbiome we don't understand. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, I talked about another area of cutting-edge research, which explained how our gut microbiome helps control our cholesterol levels. That was also new research. So when I saw this study where researchers categorized a gut bacteria as a performance-enhancing microorganism, I knew I had to share it with you. I mean, these results are crazy cool. The researchers saw that one gut bacteria named Veillonella, it actually made people a better athlete and a better runner. The study I'm talking about today grew out of some previous research that saw that athletes had quite a different composition in their microbiome compared to people that had a more sedentary lifestyle. And specifically, these more active people, they had elevated amounts of some certain microorganisms like Veillonella, Bacteroides, and Prevotella. This was really the first clue that exercising has the ability to change someone's gut microbiome. So if you're someone who exercises, the mere fact that you're more active, this is changing the abundance of microorganisms in your gut and also what specific microorganisms are going to grow and live there. The study we're looking at today wanted to push this knowledge even further. They wanted to look at questions like, what gut bacteria are associated with athletic performance and why? I mean, why would bacteria in your colon make you a better runner or a faster runner? The researchers really wanted to unravel this mystery about what is so special about an athlete's microbiome compared to everyone else. How did these researchers identify these performance-enhancing microorganisms? Well, it all started with the idea to look at which gut bacteria are associated with athletic sessions or recovering from athletic sessions. What they ended up doing was recruiting a group of people that had run the Boston Marathon and another group of people who led a more sedentary lifestyle. The researchers used stool samples from all the participants to identify what is their composition in the gut microbiome. And this is no easy feat because our gut microbiome is really complex. I mean, you can look at their data here. They had to identify a lot of different strains, a lot of different microorganisms. Not so easy. The researchers collected these samples 5 days leading up to the marathon and then 5 days after the marathon for the elite runners. Of course, for the sedentary patients, this was just a normal 10 days because if you don't train for a marathon, I don't recommend running one. And the results from this first experiment were extremely eye-opening. The scientists saw that one specific bacteria called Veillonella, its abundance or the amount of Veillonella before versus after working out is extremely different. And what you can see on this graph is that each marathon runner is represented by a different colored line. Now, days -5 to -1, those are the days before the marathon, where days 1 through 5 are after the marathon. So of course, the marathon took place on day 0 here. And what you might notice on this graph is when they put the lines in, there's an upward trend, which means that the population of Veillonella, it actually grew in abundance after the marathon when the runners were resting. So this got the researchers thinking like, hey, there might be some link, some connection between exercising and the amount of that bacteria Veillonella. But this experiment alone was not enough to definitely prove that. at least yet. The second interesting result from this part of the experiment was that Veillonella, it appeared to be much more common in the marathon runner's gut than in the gut of people who led a sedentary lifestyle. And you can sort of see that here in these two graphs, that Veillonella is much more likely to be found in your gut if you're someone who is a runner or an athlete than someone who doesn't really have an active lifestyle, doesn't really exercise. Although these results are extremely interesting, again, it's not enough proof that it's this Veillonella, these bacteria, that are specifically improving the athlete's performance. To do that, we need to do some more experiments that find a specific mechanism of how Veillonella is able to improve the athlete's performance. The next step for these scientists was some mice experiments. And I know you might be thinking, like, why did they move from humans to mice? But these animals, experimenting with them, you have a lot of advantages. Like, it's easier to test a higher number of subjects. The mice can be sacrificed to do measurements you can't do on a living organism. And it's a lot harder to get approval to inject something into humans versus injecting or testing a hypothesis with mice. It's just a lot more relaxed, for obvious and for good reasons. Now, to test if there's any potential benefits of Veillonella on athletic performance, the scientists came up with an animal exercise experiment. Basically, they give one group of mice Veillonella, that microorganism we keep finding in elite athletes, and they give another group of mice, the control group, a dose of a different microorganism called Lactobacillus. So that way both groups are receiving a dose of microorganisms. What happened to the mice that were dosed with the Veillonella? Well, they were able to run significantly longer times before they were exhausted. On average, they ran 13% longer than the control group, and that's what you see here. So the blue dots are the maximum runtime for those mice that had the Veillonella, and the red dots are the control group, the group that got a different microorganism. And it's pretty clear here, Veillonella seems to increase this runtime. They also saw that when that control group, the group of mice that was given Lactobacillus, if they then switched that group to have a dose of Veillonella, the mouse's runtimes actually increased. That's the red lines on the graph here. So what you see is in weeks 1 through 3, they're given Lactobacillus, sort of that control microorganism, and their runtimes are not as good. But once they are switched to Veillonella, their runtimes actually increase during weeks 4, 5, and 6. They're able to run longer times once they are dosed with Veillonella, which means that in both humans and mice, it seems like Veillonella is a performance-enhancing microorganism. But the question still remains, how is Veillonella, how is it elevating these athletes' ability to run? And for that, we need to look at what specifically is this bacteria doing in our gut. What we already know about this microorganism is that it uses lactate, it metabolizes lactate and converts it into short-chain fatty acids like acetate or propionate. And this turns out to be actually a pretty unique pathway. Most microorganisms in our gut don't have the ability to pull off this full pathway shown here. That's very unique to Veillonella. But how is this pathway related to exercising? Well, you may already know this, but when you exercise, your body produces a lot of lactate. Maybe you've heard it called lactic acid, lactate, lactic acid. They're very similar. So when an athlete is running, say, a marathon, their body is generating a lot of lactate, and in the gut, Veillonella is actually able to use that lactate and to make more useful products. Basically, Veillonella can act like this big sink that can use all that lactate that's in our bloodstream. But that's not all, because if you remember, I said Veillonella, it's capable of converting lactate to propionate. And actually, there's a lot of research that has already shown propionate. This molecule is really important for many things you need when exercising. Propionates have been seen to help increase your heart rate when you're exercising, which allows you to maximize your oxygen usage. They also help regulate blood pressure. They increase your resting energy expenditure, or you'll burn more calories while you're resting. So it's really Veillonella's ability to make propionate that is enhancing these athletes' performance. It's what's elevating them to the next level. With all these results taken into account, I hope I was able to illustrate to you how your microbiome is a critical component of your physical performance. Because not only did Veillonella metabolize large amounts of lactate that are generated during exercise, it also then produces more useful molecules that help elevate your athletic performance. I mean, that's pretty cool.